This is the first time. I have never gone live on YouTube before, so it was a little bit of fiddling around, and as you can see, there is a bit of I think it's all working wonderful, but I wanted to really come on to speak about a very important topic, that is the sense of self, right? When you had a lot of childhood trauma, when you have complex PTSD or any kind of mental health condition, when you going to therapy, right? A lot of that, a lot of the work revolves around that sense of self. Who am I, right? You may have gone through very turbulent times too, questioning that self, how can it be? How can so many things happen in my life, who is that? All right. So I want to speak to that today because it was really brought to life again when we were talking about this book. I don't know if you've ever come across it, Atomic Habits by James Clear, right? We're reading this as part of the book club at the moment. And in that book, he talks a lot about how when we want to change habits, that sense of self, that who I am, the identity is also very important, as well as the thoughts and things that we are having about ourselves, those concepts that we created around. So I'm a person, right, who always fails. I just never finish things. I am a procrastinator, right? All those kind of beliefs and things and stories that we have around. Like, he really highlights this in that book, that if we don't address that sense of that beliefs and that part of our habits, and then if you want to change a habit, whether this is the way, if you stick with procrastinating, right? If you want to change that habit and you want to feel like, I'm a more productive person, we also need to address that at the core of who I am, that identity, right? So, but people often question, right? Is that something that I can change? Right? I really want you to sit with that a little bit and go deeper. And we're looking back in our lives, for many of us, especially if you're trauma survivors, right? If you're with certain people, you act a certain way. If you're with a different group of people, you may act a very different way. Have you ever done this? Right? I sure have. Right? It's almost like we're slipping into different roles to perhaps fit in. We create identities or behavior patterns around certain people that we believe that is, or it's even not even a conscious belief. It's very subconscious for people with complex PTSD, right? We create those things to keep us safe, right? If I'm with these people, if I act this way, they most likely accept me, or I can be part of it, that sense of belonging, right? And we do a lot of things just to fit in, just to feel safe, right? Especially when we're still in a very reactive kind of phase of our life. So I don't know, right? You're listening, and you might have been on this journey for a long time. You may have had many different therapists working on this for decades, right? Like myself, right? And you probably might be very aware of it. But there was a time in my life where I was completely oblivious to the fact that I'm doing that. And I think this is really important for us to realize that sense of self, that construct that we create in our mind, even when we are not conscious of it, right? And we can work on this with a therapist, or perhaps a friend, or your partner might be able to point certain things out for you to help you to bring this a little bit more into your awareness. And once we have that in awareness, what we're doing, we actually have the ability to change that sense of identity, right? And we can change that at any point in time. We can change it multiple times in the day. It's not a set thing, because it only lives in our head. It's a mental construct, right? All our mental chatter also goes along with the identity. I hope that it's kind of hard to put words around this, right? But when I was still in a space where I was very dark, where I thought I was the most horrible person, I was a failure, I'm a burden to this world and that society, that was my sense of identity. And when I had that sense of identity, this is who I am, the mental chatter in my head was, confirming that, right? It was horrible. That I had the most horrific inner critique, right? That toxic inner voice, and you might have had the same, right? But as we shift along and we change that identity and finding who I am really, right now I'm on a more spiritual path, and I want to talk to that in a moment as well, because identity has a different meaning when you're in that, right? But to really allow yourself to give yourself some space that are and room to assess this. So this is, and not constrict this. This is who I am and I can never change, right? This is how I'm born. This is my genes, right? This is my culture. It's like, yeah, yes, it had an influence. It certainly shaped me. But at any point in my time, in my life, right, I can look at this and really question, does this still serve me? Does this help me become or create a life that I like or don't like? More like, right? Anything, we have the ability to choose that. Right? Like, let's just leave that for there. I don't really going to get into too much of the step by steps of this in this video. I don't want to do it for too long, but I don't even know whether I can see you guys commenting here or not. I can just see, you guys can even see my cat food in the back corner here. I see Bridger, hi. Anyway, so if you guys have questions here, please ask, so we can have it a little bit more interactive, because I believe this is just such an important question, that who am I? And this book really got me thinking a lot about how this evolved. And as I said, I'm on a more spiritual path now, and on a spiritual path when we're talking about a sense of self, that concept that we are creating in our mind, it is about letting that go, right? So people come to me and I say, so what am I doing now, right? Am I just not creating a sense of self, because in that book it says for me to change the habits, I have to have that. And I was like, slow down. When I was going through crisis at the beginning, as I said, I had a sense of self. I had this concept in my mind, and it was very negative. And I truly believe that for people, especially if you have complex PTSD, if you had a lot of trauma, it is almost essential, or at least in my experience for myself, it was essential for me to shift from that very negative, self-destructive sense of self that I had into a more healthier concept about myself and who I am, still having a sense of self, right? Still having that ego, if you want to call it that, that personal sense of self that I am, moving into a more healthier, before I can even contemplate going onto a spiritual path where I was thinking of letting that go, right? That personal sense of self versus the more conscious, the pure awareness, supreme consciousness, Christ consciousness, whatever you want to call that, right? If you're on a spiritual path, depending on which teacher you follow, all these different kind of wording there. So I invite you to really check in with yourself. Where are you? Do you have a healthy enough concept and self-identity that allows you to let go of that identity yet? Or is there still something really necessary for you to actually start having a more healthy eating habits, right? Rather than have very self-destructive eating habits, right? Or and any other anything that would have been good for my body, for my physical health, is what I avoided. I did the complete opposite. I hated myself so much, right, that I did so much damage to my body at this time. And so I believe in those moments, just like you said, to actually have those more healthy habits, to have these 1 degree shifts, right? It's not about creating a whole new concept about you in one go. It's those little 1 degree shifts. Where can I allow myself to be a little bit kinder to myself? Where can I, in what area of my life? Either is it perhaps that when you're going for nature walks, in that moment when you're by yourself, it's just you and nature, that in that moment I can have a different self-construct identity and think about myself in a different way. I can hold myself in a different way. And then embrace that and feel into that. Keep practicing that. Oh, this is what that feels like in my body when I am like this. And then eventually you will be able to have the same kind of feeling in other areas of your life. Perhaps with a very good friend that you feel close with, right? Perhaps not so much at work just yet, or the more complex kind of places, but to look for where are the areas it is perhaps a little bit more easy for me to practice this, to allow myself to experiment with this and be playful, to not be so serious about myself, right? The whole who I am. I thought that I was so serious about that. Loosen up a little bit about that. It almost treat it like this is I've been giving an actor's role. This is my script, right? And today I got a different script. I'm playing a different actor, and practice this and realize that at any point you can really change your behavior. It is quite a fun experiment for yourself to do. I just see Jill. Oh, hi. Nearly missed it. Let me read out some questions. Is it possible to reach a stable sense of self and no longer have to work on it? Right? Yes. That's a very interesting question, right? Because especially when we're looking into where in your journey you are, like I said, when I am on a more spiritual kind of journey now, and when you're talking about a sense of self, that notion, that personal self. And that is, in a way, never really that stable, because when we're talking about the personal self, the ego, this is all of our thoughts and all of our emotions, right? Our emotions, they're a bit of a roller coaster. It doesn't matter whether you have PTSD or not. Emotions change, moods change, right? People always talk about, I'm not in the mood today, right? And so there's always some kind of fluctuation there. But there is a part of yourself that is behind all of that awareness, that pure awareness of it all, that part of you that is actually witnessing the fluctuation that you have, right? There's something within you that is noticing that my sense of self is not that stable. Do you realize that? Connect with that part of you that is noticing that. That's the stable part. And the other part is witnessing what that human, that personal Tanya does out there in the world, right? It's not always that stable. But I think in terms of PTSD, I believe, yes, there is a stable sense of self, right? At the beginning, it was a very self-destructive kind of way. And that is very different to what the sense of self, if I have one now, is. I hope that kind of answers the question. Will it always be a progress? Yeah, I think it's always something to look at and always to check in with ourselves, to notice, am I playing a role here, or am I being the true me? Am I allowing to just be and express? Can I sit with that person and just listen without my mental chatter going on already, thinking about how I am going to answer and what I'm going to say next, right? How often do we do that? Me included, right? It's often we do that. We're not fully present with a person, but allowing ourselves to be fully there. And even if I don't have an answer to anything, to be still okay. It doesn't say anything about me, but having that level of presence. How do I kind of explain that in an okay way? Sometimes I still lack the right words, because so much in my life has changed, right? And as I it's not even comparable. Sometimes I wake up and it's like, can that be true? Can my life actually be that good? I was getting a little bit emotional about that, right? Because, like you guys probably know, that complex PTSD, it is a really turbulent and very horrible kind of time. It's hard to explain to people what goes on when it feels like, almost like you feel like you lose your mind in a sense. Well, actually, I didn't lose my mind. I was like, 100% in my mind. My mind was just racing. There was all these different thoughts and replays and flashbacks, and it was so busy. Well, now there is those moments of silence, right? There's so much peace. There's things have slowed down, so much. Yeah. I have often wondered, which is I have often wondered that in terms of becoming securely attached to the self, yeah, if there is I can never say that word, ubiquitous, sorry, I'm struggling with that word, personality, which more or less stable traits. To being attached to that sense of self. I think this is something else that we really want to look at, right? Because we do get quite attached to certain aspects of our sense of self. I was very attached to that sense of self that I'm a trauma survivor for a long time, and I couldn't let go of those stories. I thought this is who I am, right? And the more I could actually process the traumas, the less this tormented my day-to-day life, the more I was able then to like go even of that identity that because you're more than that. You're not a trauma survivor, right? There's so much more to you than that, to really broaden it up. So let's say, so I can guess that they dynamically will incorporate current stresses and so bias our reactions. Yes. When we are still in a quite a reactive state, when we're making whatever happens externally, the way people respond to us, the way people say, when we're making that mean something about who I am as a person, at the core, fundamentally, right? Who I am, when we allow that to happen, then it's almost like we're letting the wind blow us over again, right? It's like when there's no stable sense of self, or that groundedness, I know who I am. Doesn't matter what happens externally. This is who I am, and I am okay, right? I'm an okay person. This was something I could never say in the past. I couldn't see myself as okay. I so thought that I'm so fundamentally flawed and broken and beyond repair. Right? That was my view of myself. Can you then see, when you have that concept of yourself, what kind of mind shadow goes along with that, for that to be fueled, and what that mind shadow, what kind of emotional storm that is constantly creating, and instability in your life as well, right? Because it's just so messy. I didn't realize that you have such a big view here. It's like my cat's here. It's my little tiger. He got me through the most difficult times in my life. What is the relationship between the sense of self, being in presence with our core self, and addiction? Yeah, wow, that's a big question, isn't it? Our sense of self and addiction. It's quite interesting, actually, say it even though, because it talks about habits in that book. He does mention addiction in there a bit as well, and there he gave that one example just for it was smoking. When you're trying to give up smoking and someone offers you a cigarette, the person who says, "No, I'm trying to quit," is most likely going to back smoking, because they're still identified as a smoker, versus the person said, "No, thank you, I don't smoke," or "I'm not a smoker." You see the subtle difference? As long as you think, "I am someone who I am an addict," or "I am a smoker," or whatever it is, right? "I'm an alcoholic." As long as I identify, I make that's my identity. And I used to have a drinking problem. I haven't been drinking. I've been sober for a good 15 years or more now, probably more like 20 years now. But if I would identify at that, then obviously the thoughts would match that, and my behavior would more likely pull me back. And that's where he's really, in this book, I highly recommend this book. He has such a brilliant way, such a simplistic way in explaining what is actually going on in our head when we are not following through on our habits, and when we do. But in an addiction, yeah, we really want to address that core sense of self, who I am and how I see myself, my ability, um, to give up as well, right? That this is actually even possible. If Because if you have that mental chatter going on, there's no way I could ever give up, right? To really look at this. Oh, who is saying that? And who is listening to that chatter, right? Because there's a part of you that's aware that this voice is constantly picking at me. This voice is cruel. This voice in my head is judging me in very horrible ways all the time, right? To really check in on that. Yeah, but I think especially in addiction, where obviously there's the physiological part of addiction as well, right? So we don't want to minimize that aspect of it, the actual withdrawals. But we can't just go through the withdrawals and then think, not change anything about who I am as an identity, right? Or anything about the environment. That's what he talks about in the book as well, right? That people who came back, people who were, I think it was in the Vietnam War, there was those veterans that were heroin addicts, and a lot of people, when they came back to the country, they switched environments, actually gave up their addiction a lot easier. And they had some statistics to compare when people go into those like giving up heroin in those more what do you call it? I'm lost for words now. It's not a retreat. Rehab, is it? Yeah. When they're in rehab, so they're removed from the environment and they can give up the addiction, but then they go back into the same environment and there's the same cues that trigger you going back to that triggering that want you to have this, whatever that is that you want. Then it's really hard to resist that, right? So we want to look at the sense of self, who you are as a person. We want to give this up, and also the environmental cues that most likely trigger for you that behavior for you. I hope that makes sense. Yes. Yes, I have complex MPDD. Yeah, so many mental health diagnoses. I have been surviving in the character so long. Who am I really existentially? Yes, it's a very deep question, isn't it? Who am I really? And I don't know about you. There's a time where I wrote a lot of poems about this. That was the only way for me to express or kind of process that. Well, what is actually going on here? Who am I? Right? my inner world is such a war. And then I'm outside, and then there's this beautiful sunset, but I can't actually really enjoy the sunset because there's all this horror going on inside, and this is even real, right? and you know, when you're having flashbacks, and there's so much going on for us with complex PTSD, right? Because our brain doesn't know the difference whether when we're thinking about something in the past or something about the future, or if it's happening right now, it does not know the difference. It will produce the same kind of chemicals that create the same that emotional cocktail that you felt, whether this was in the past, or for my mind, it used to love catastrophizing about the future, right? How I am going to be homeless, like alone on the side of the road, dying with no one's going to care, no one's even noticing. That was always where my mind used to go. Yeah. It's very confusing to just seem to be wandering around. Yes. Because sometimes we feel a little lost, right? It's like, wow, all this horrible stuff happened. And what now? You know, how can you put that aside and really create a life that you enjoy after all this, right? It just does not make sense for a long time. It didn't for me, and I think it's important for us to allow ourselves, right? That's why I said at the beginning, I had to try on different identities, different roles, and see how they fit till I found something that was a little bit more healthy, that actually helped me to shift out of some of these very toxic behavior patterns that I had, or self-destructive mostly. They were, and to help me shift out, right? To not take things so seriously, and for me it was really to just try it out, be playful, and what is it, right? That sparks something in me, and to always be curious, to observing of what is going on, right? Because when we are really sick, when our PTSD is really flared up, we get so absorbed in our mind that it almost feels like I am the mind, I am the thoughts, I am whatever the mind comes up with, right? I really believe that. It really hooked me into this, right? But when we are a little bit healthier, when we're a little bit more stable, then we can actually notice, oh, here's my inner critique, right? Have you ever noticed your inner critique? You actually caught your inner critique in the moment, and it's like, it's such a horrible thing that when you notice, you're pulling yourself a little bit back and you're noticing there's a part within you that is noticing all this. There's a part within you that is aware of all this mental chatter that is going on. So who is talking? If I am also aware that there is a talking voice, I cannot be that voice. I am not that critical voice, right? It is just thoughts that are coming up. It's not who I am. It's not who I am. If that makes sense. Let me see. Okay. I like to be of service to people, but maybe that's the problem. Maybe taking advantage of. Yes. I think when we want to be of service, right, we can create a whole identity around this as well, right? I am someone who is of service, right? I am a people pleaser. A lot of people have this as their identity, right? And it's not a healthy one, right? Like you said, I always say, if you want to be of service, if I go in and I choose, do I want to be of service here? Do I want to help these people? And I only do that if I don't expect anything in return. When I feel like I'm completely full, my cup in there, I'm full, right? I'm full, I'm filled with love. I am giving from the overflow. Does that make sense? Because when I'm giving from the overflow, it doesn't matter. I never feel used. But if I am giving because I'm feeling so empty and I need to feel worthy, I need to feel like, I need to feel belonging, I need to feel accepted and respected, and I want to be somebody. I want to feel special, and all these things that this is human, right? This is human. We all want that, right? I'm sure it's not just me who wanted to feel special. Let me know. But it was a huge longing for me for so long to feel like I wanted to be so special, right? That's just to somebody, that some person thinks that I am special, right? And that is because when you had trauma so young in your life, a little child needs that. So when we then become an adult, we still have this childlike longings of being adored and feeling special and loved on and stuff, right? We miss out on those kind of things, and to really acknowledge that when this comes up within ourselves, right? Oh, that's why. Yes. And just really give yourself a moment to and acknowledge that younger self within you. Oh, yes, that was really difficult, but we want to really validate and acknowledge that this was true. This was true in my life, right? This was not there. But how can I give that to myself now in this moment, right? So cool. Sorry for all the questions. I sometimes want to give but can't stand being given to. Oh, yes. I'm glad you bring that up too, right? Yes, want to be given, but we can't stand. I can so relate to that. Being independent was so important too, and having other people help me, I would bring out the worst in me. Right, I would be so rude and abrupt to people that I pull away. Right, they didn't want to help me anymore after that, and to acknowledge that too. This is still a safety mechanism within ourselves, right? So something in childhood happened. That trauma happens in very complex ways, and the way, depending on what age we were and how we make sense of it, right? that somehow we coupled other people helping us. That means that I'm a failure, right? I can't do anything by myself. I was shamed and blamed and ridiculed for having to need help, right? So I created a whole concept around this as well. But this is who I am. I can't be independent. So now when other people come and try to help me, they subconsciously, I thought they're telling me that I'm not capable, right? That was my story. That might not be your story. That there's all sorts of different stories we have around why this is so difficult for ourselves, and to be really honest and go deep there, right? Journal about it. It's like, what is really there? Why is this so difficult, right? Because when we're allowing someone to help and support us, we actually have to let our guard down a little bit, right? To let that actually in, to let that touch our heart. Hey, there's someone that actually cares about me. And when we're letting that guard down, what happens sometimes is this feels really overwhelming for us, right? Because there's a lifetime longing for us, our child longing that someone comes and supports and helps me and protects me, and it was never there. And then someone comes in, and the smallest smidge of that feeling supported that, it's that emotion that comes up, that sadness, which sounds probably crazy to other people, but for me, perhaps for you too, there's almost sadness that this is what I wanted but I couldn't have, and now nope. And all the walls come back up, right? And we can't let it in. It's so emotional, it is, that it's so loaded with other things, right? This little moment of specialness, that someone is actually looking out for you, um, stirs up a lot of sadness, a lot of within you, perhaps, right? I've got says, I have quite a good awareness of self and my core wounds, and when I know I am being over the top in my reaction, but for some reason I still do it. I can't seem to control it. Yes. And every time we notice that, right, this is an opportunity where we can practice to have some compassion, some kindness to ourselves. I'm having my own back, right? Okay, I noticed that I'm aware. In retrospect, I haven't been able to catch myself in the moment yet, and that is okay. Right. I know it takes my brain a little while to rewire and to build up on that capacity for me to catch myself when that happens in the moment. To really trust that, to bring some kindness to that. I think it is really important. It will eventually, you will be able to catch yourself in the moment, right? I know from if you're in a spiritual path, they kind of don't, you don't want to visualize much, but at the beginning of my healing journey, I used visualization a lot, and in a sense that whatever the situation was, and I wasn't aware in that situation, then I would go back and I would replay me noticing that in the moment and being aware and how that would have played out. And I practice that. What is happening in my body, becoming really acutely aware of what is there a shift? Is there tenseness? For me, it was often the shoulders. Maybe for you, it's the stomach twisting or something, or you're clenching your teeth, right? That things like that. It's usually a tightening up, right? There's some tightening up, and then we go into reaction mode often, right? to become so aware of yourself, like, oh, I just tensed up, and then go from that moment and practice allowing yourself to relax again and teach my nervous system that now in 2023, I'm in an adult body now. I'm basically okay. This situation is like a false alarm, right? Our amygdala constantly sends off alarms. It's a little bit like, the smoke detector that you have in the house when it goes off when you burn a toast slightly, right? It's a false alarm. We don't want it to go off. It's so annoying. And in the same kind of sense, right? Our nervous system reacts like this is some immediate dangerous kind of situation. It's a false alarm. and to catch that. And I was like, oh, thank you. Right. I'm always grateful for my nervous system to be so tuned in. Thank you for trying to protect me and work so hard, right? Because our nervous system works over time, really, right? This is why we so often plummet into depression, right? Because it's overworked and then it can't cope anymore. We plummet and we go to this numbness and depression. So we we feel some way and then we'll go, we do this up and down, right? And it kind of makes sense, right? This can happen. I feel like I'm totally off topic, but I'm quite enjoying it, and I'm hoping you're finding it helpful. It's the first time ever live on YouTube, and I wasn't sure whether you guys can actually interact, but it seems to work quite well, even knowing I've been having old tech issues. That's why I haven't been doing videos for a little while, but this works pretty well. I like this, but I might do this more often. Kevin says, really good points. I think you have a course on something. You are right. I want to run away and then become depressed. It is insane. Yes. If they want to look out for you, what do they want back? Yes. That suspiciousness within us, right? And again, this is to recognize that this happened, right? People will think trauma or abuse and things happens and everything is horrible, but sometimes some people, they're actually really nice and they're giving you gifts and stuff. They're luring because they want something in return, right? Whether it's to silence you or abuse you in all sorts of ways, right? There's that twistedness to really recognize this, where this is coming from, and to just notice that, right? To really honor that within yourself, how difficult that was for your little one, right? For your younger self to get through this and trying to make sense of the world, and really remind yourself that our brain doesn't stop developing till, I don't know, late 20s or 30s, let's say 30s. So for a lot of us, the trauma and abuse started pretty much after born, right? Or in very young years. You didn't even have the brain to make sense of what is happening to you and why, right? And you got through that. You survived. And all your younger self got all sorts of clever ways to survive that, to get you to here, right? To really honor that and thank that part of you that did that, but also remind yourself that now I'm in an adult body. I've got this now, right? I'm in the driver's seat and I'm looking out for all my younger selves, right? So really, I'm having their back. I'm really honoring. I think this is really important for us in order that to really be thankful for. I know how in psychology they call this, what is this, maladaptive coping strategies and all sorts of weird names for this, right? I think no, it was very clever ways a little kid came up with, right? They didn't have many tools, they didn't have many options, right? Now as an adult, I have options, right? If you're rude to me, I always have the option as the door, I'm just going to walk out, right? This is a very simple option. As a child, you don't even have the most basic options of just walking out. It's not there, right? So to really acknowledge that those coping mechanisms were extremely clever. But right now, to really check in with yourself, you have this level of awareness within yourself to really honor that. I am aware of this is what I'm doing. And I get that sense this isn't really serving me that well. I'm not quite happy with the way my life is going. I'm not quite happy the way I react to people, right? I want to get people to think of me differently, right? I don't want other people to think of me that I am only of service or helping them because I want something in return, right? I'd hate if people think that of me. I used to think that of other people, right? And I had a friend point that out to me. This is actually very hurtful, right? And I never flipped the roles. I never thought, oh yeah, if someone would think that of me, then I would be really hurt of that, right? To catch myself in that way, to trust that there is some people out there who just give unconditionally, right? And this is not something that we have experienced. That is why this is so hard for us to accept and let that guard down and let that in, right? So many people can't even take a compliment without giving a compliment back, right? How often have you done that? Someone compliments you on something that you made, and immediately you have to counter it with something else, right? Instead of just saying, "Oh, thank you," and giving yourself a few seconds, right? I always say to my clients, give yourself three seconds or 10 seconds. You know, build it up, make it last a little longer. That let that touch your heart and let that be okay. No one can take you that feeling away. Allow that to be there. Yes. Yes. I find it hard to know to be spiritual religious. How can a young child be neglected as much? I was close to God at one time, but it has been burned out of me again existentially. Mhm. Yes. That's a very powerful question too, isn't it? Like I'm born in Austria, and in Austria you're born Catholic. Right? I went to school in a Catholic convent. And as a little child, I really believed in a God, but at some point, like you said, I never forget that moment when I was about 8 years old. Because the priest said, if you pray to God, you can ask God questions, and he will answer your questions in your prayer. And me being a young child and perhaps developmentally quite delayed, I thought that I would hear a voice. God is talking back to me, but he never did. And so I eventually I came to a realization that God made a big mistake. He put me in the wrong body on the wrong planet. That's how I made sense of this. And I said, I'm really alone now. I don't even have God, right? So for a long time, my relationship to God was very disrupted. I steered away from all religion, and I still do now. Right? I don't belong to a religion. I believe in, I'm very spiritual, but this is very different in a sense because I don't belong to an organization that teaches certain ways of being and certain ways of praying, because I don't believe that we need to go to a place to pray to a God that is up there. I don't believe that. God is within you, right? You are part of God. And as crazy as this sounds, it might make more sense if you look at it as the sun, right? The sun is out there in the universe, and we have all these sun rays that come all the way down to planet Earth, giving us light and warmth and all that. Are the sun rays that come all the way to planet Earth, are they still the sun? I think about it. Yes and no, right? But they're part of the sun, and this is kind of similar in that sense. God is the sun in that metaphor, and the sun rays is us humans, right? So we are part. We have that within us. So I don't believe we need to belong to a religion, but I needed some kind of faith, some belief that there's something bigger out there than that little Tanya, that little me, right? That created all this, that helped me to ground and shift something in me, to start believing in the bigger good in this world. I don't know. I hope that makes sense. But I think religion is very different to that, right? I don't. Yeah, I don't believe in any rituals. I don't believe that you need to pray certain times or not even meditate, right? I use, how do you say that? I use the word meditation because I use a similar sitting and to help me to focus the way up my thinking, right? To become more, to get more clear in my actions and my thinking. kind of way. I'm not sure if that answered your question. I stay in my response as if I'm fire. I a spewing volcano. I can't drop it and detach or become depressed. I stay in righteousness and fire. How can I communicate kindly about this when I'm in this situation? Yes. Yes. And after that happens, how do you feel about yourself? What does your mind tell you about that situation? Right? Because we're doing those like fire. Yes. They say, oh yeah, a volcano drop, and you can't drop it, right? That need to be right. To really go back, when is it the first time you felt that same need that you needed to be right? Often that need to be right, and I'm able to let go of something, that there's usually a sense of safety with all that, right? There is a part of us, not just the safety. I'm lacking the word now. I'm feeling into this a little more. Because in that moment when that volcano is happening, I don't think you can shift and actually, like you said, how can you communicate kindly when that volcano is happening? There's no kind of communication because it's a reactive emotion, right? It's no longer a conscious choice. The volcano is not a conscious choice. It is something to become more clear within yourself initially, even in smaller moments where it's not a volcano, where the moments when you can feel that fire. Maybe it's just a cute little candle rather than a fire, right? A cute little candlelight in your life. When do you have that? Right, and go to those situations like, how can I deal with them a little bit better? How can I help my nervous system to feel safe in this situation without being right, without actually having to change it? How can I allow for that in that moment, if that makes sense? If I understood the question right. I'm not sure if I understood the question right here. I know I'm over the top. So that's a construct that you created around yourself, right? So finally, we go back to the original topic, the sense of self. It feels like I've been off on a tangent a bit, but they are the things we want to really become very aware of, right? These are the concepts that you created, and your mind will always play things out to play that role again. Whatever happens in your life, it will look for opportunities to slide back in that role. Here I am, right? I am over the top again. I knew it. That's who I am. Right? This is a concept to, does that still serve me to think of myself about that way, right? To really notice. And for some of us, that being over the top and being loud, there probably was one point in your life where that being that role has helped you in some, even when it was just a small way. It protected you of something, or it had a better outcome, and it worked in that instance for you, and you kept it, right? This is how all our behavior patterns came along, right? Because our younger self, like we said, had very limited ways of coping with things, and certain things we might not even remember exactly when that was, and it doesn't matter. We don't need to remember them, but to just know at some point in my life, this very behavior had a purpose. It helped me to survive, but right now I realize it doesn't serve me so well anymore, right? And I don't need to keep playing that role. I can actually change that identity. I can let that go, right? To really open that possibility up. I don't have to keep that. Right? I don't have to own that. Mm. Do you think us little sun rays are subject to randomness in life, neglect, abuse, or is it the sun involved in our blessings or demise? So very this fully depends on where you're at on your healing journey, right? If 20 years ago you would have told me that what happened to me was in a sense a blessing, right? That this was for my good, for my inner growth, that this is what I needed at this lifetime for my journey of if you're looking at spiritual growth, I would have been extremely rude to you. And I would have not had much nice to say. But now that I have healed some of those wounds, so I'm in a very different space, and I think so differently. I truly believe that, yeah, this is all things that I can use for my inner growth. Yeah. Even the stuff that happened now, right? For a few years ago when my complex PTSD, my big flare up, that was somewhere around 2005, 2006. And then when I was past the whole PTSD stuff around, I don't know, 2010, things got really much better. But then in 2018-ish, my physical health really collapsed, right? And I literally thought I was going to die. It was horrible. You know, my digestive system completely didn't work. Had Meniere's attack, the most violent vertigo attacks. I could imagine. I lost my depth perception. All this kind of stuff happened, and it made me question everything again. It's like, how can God let that happen again? Haven't I been through enough? Right? That was my question to God. Haven't I been through enough? It's like, and the answer, if I'm really true with myself, was no. I haven't learned my lesson in a sense that I was so focused on pushing through. I was so forcing things in my life. I wanted to make them happen, right? I was at uni, I wanted that PhD, I forced myself to study, right? I wasn't listening to my body at all. I wasn't listening. I was pushing through that. I made myself work and all these kind of things, right? I wasn't in tune with myself. That's why I got so sick. And that was a really difficult thing for me to own, that I actually created this myself this time, right? This time around. And I can see now this was actually the blessing for my awakening, really, that mostly that moment where I literally thought I'm going to die because my health was so bad. That became a moment of me really waking up what the meaning of life is and who I am really at the core, to be able to let go of all these identities and all these roles that I'm playing, right? And even the roles that I have been playing in terms of having this YouTube channel. And I had a Facebook group, 2 Facebook groups. You know, one of the Facebook groups had over 25,000 people in it. So I had a role there, identity, and I let that all go, right? All those identities. So as like blessings, I don't know. They're hard. I like to see things as opportunities for me to grow. And everything that shows up in my life, I can use this as an opportunity to grow, inner growth, or I can resist it. And if I resist it and I fight it and I can't accept that this is happening, what happens within yourself? Right? It creates turbulence, it creates suffering, and it creates rumination and hateful thoughts and the energy, right? But if I can actually accept it, I don't have to like it to accept it, right? To put it like my car breaking down, I don't like that. But I can kind of accept it that this happened. I cannot change it. I can accept it and go with that. Yeah. Anyway, is our purpose and meaning about inner growth? Yes. I think our most deepest, most purest purpose is to find out who we truly are, right? That the pure, that consciousness, to be able to let go of all those identities, all those things that I thought are me, or who I am. This is me. To recognize that presence within myself, that level of awareness, or some people call it oneness, right? To embody that and be living in that state. I think that is the purpose, right? This is what they refer to as coming home, in a sense, coming home inside of you, right? So it doesn't matter so much what happens externally, that the turbulence, how people react, how your co-workers treat you, right? Yeah. And I notice the more I can stay in that, or be in that level of awareness and presence, people respond to me very different to how I was like 20, 30 years ago, right? I was very abrupt or rude or stern, and I had this constant frown and very seriousness, and I was rushing around, right? And I was a very different, I had a very different energy around me, let's put it that way, right? You know, some people that you meet and it's like, oh, it's just so nice to be around them, and you almost feel energized after you leave. And then there's some people you're around, it's like, oh my gosh, they just suck all the energy out of me, right? Or they have it just, you know what I mean? There's energy, and a lot of us trauma survivors are very in tune with people's energy, right? This was another thing that our younger self learned, to be very in tune with people's energies, because the better I can read people, the more likely I can keep myself safe. I know when I need to get away quickly, right? Those kind of things, right? So, yeah. I realize we've been on this for nearly an hour now. I think are we complete? Do we have other more burning questions? Let me see. Sounds like we need to convince ourselves, train ourselves to recognize what is actually good around us, like children, or a sunset, or a flower, neurolinguistic programming, or just subject. I'm beginning to feel like I'm sitting at the feet of a guru. Oh, you're beautiful. You know what? I love that you mentioned the sunset. Because I didn't realize for the longest time that level of awareness, that level of presence, that bliss, that was actually possible for me. But we've all had these glimpses, right? When you've seen the most stunning sunrise or sunset, you know, that moment, you even say, I was speechless. It was so beautiful, I was speechless. We have these moments, right? And it's also pure bliss. And you know why this moment was so pure and so beautiful? What was missing in that moment? That mental chatter. It was silent. For a moment, even if it was a few seconds, right, when this happens, it was silence. And that is so beautiful, that silence. So we all have the capacity. We just want to practice that muscle so we can stay in that silence longer, to realize that I don't need that mind to chatter all the time. It's not actually necessary. You know, in childhood, it might have that intense, over the top, chattery thing might have been there to really try to protect me from something that happened, constantly trying to read the environment and knowing what is going on. It's like, I'm so busy, right? But to know, no, it's, oh, I can just sit here and enjoy. And there's no thought. I don't have to have a thought to enjoy. I don't have to label the sunset. I don't have to identify all the different colors on there. I can just take it in without words. Right? To really, I wish you're finding moments in your life where you can do that. You know, where could you go, even now, just right now? to have a moment, or even just smelling something, right? A peppermint push, just rub your hands on it and just smell it for a moment and not thinking. Cool. Attachment styles. Let's do the attachment on the next video. So I love that. I will keep coming back and check the comments there, but I like it. Thank you so much for participating and being engaging. I really enjoyed that, so I think I will come back. I'll do that more regularly. Maybe I can do it regularly at this time and this day, so people know when I'm coming on, and you can have some questions. But attachment has been coming up a few times, so that might be a good topic to discuss again. So thank you, and thank you for being here. And as always, I'm sending you lots and lots of love and rainbows to brighten up that world. So thank you. See you guys. Bye.